Not clean enough. Use your hands this time. Good boy. Now get out of my sight.
His hands were open, flat, not shaking, not fisted. The decision had already been made.
You ready, Mop?
One step. That's all it took. One step, and everything Ryan Hargrove built in 3 weeks collapsed in under 3 seconds. He didn't flex, didn't point, didn't say a single word to 14,000 people watching live. He picked up the mop and went back to work.
Mr. Webb, we are filing a civil complaint against you for aggravated.
4 in the morning, no traffic, no voices. Nothing but the low electric hum of fluorescent lights and the wet drag of a mop across hardwood floor. Marcus Webb moved in straight lines, left to right to left, steady, unhurried. The rhythm of a man who has done something so many times it no longer requires thought. Just muscle, just breath, just the quiet agreement between a body and its work. The gym was different at this hour. During the day, Hargrove Combat Academy was loud in the way expensive places are loud. It was cologne and competition and the specific theatrical energy of people performing effort for each other. Sneakers squeaking on sealed floors. Pads cracking, voices carrying. The kind of noise that costs $400 a month to be part of and knows it. At 4 in the morning, it was just a building. High ceilings, tinted windows. Championship banners along the north wall that nobody had touched in years. A glass trophy case near the entrance that had been locked since Marcus first came to work here and had remained locked every morning since. He passed it every shift. He had never once seen anyone open it. He didn't mind the building at 4 in the morning. The building at 4 in the morning did not look at him like he was something to be stepped over on the way to something more important. He worked his way down the main hallway, past the reception desk with its velvet rope and touchscreen check-in panel, past the framed photographs of Victor Hargrove shaking hands with fighters whose names carried weight in rooms Marcus had never been invited into, past the bulletin board with class schedules printed on cardstock so thick and cream-colored it felt less like information and more like a declaration. $400 a month. That was the entry fee to this world. $400 for the mat. The equipment. The instructors. The atmosphere. The particular quality of light that made everyone inside look like they were training for something that mattered. The parking lot outside held Range Rovers and BMW sedans and one Mercedes that belonged to a personal injury attorney who came 4 mornings a week and never acknowledged Marcus even when they were in the same hallway at the same time. Marcus earned $14 an hour. He had been earning $14 an hour at this address for 3 years. Same gray uniform, same work boots worn flat at the heels, same name tag pinned slightly crooked because the magnetic backing had snapped 6 months ago and he kept meaning to fix it, and somehow never quite did. The front desk staff knew his name from the cleaning schedule. The other maintenance worker, a man named Gerald who came in on weekends, knew Marcus never complained and never left early and made coffee in the break room at 4:15 every morning without being asked. That was the sum of what most people at Hargrove Combat Academy knew about Marcus Webb. He reached the main training room, and he stopped. The room was dark except for the red glow of exit signs and the ambient light bleeding in from the hallway. The central mat stretched across the floor like something patient, blue vinyl edged in red. The championship banners above it caught no light at this hour and hung still and dark. The air in this room was different from the rest of the building, denser. The accumulated smell of effort and rubber and the particular chemical weight of floor cleaner that never quite masked what was underneath it. Marcus had cleaned this room every morning for 3 years. He knew the exact dimensions of it without measuring. He knew where the floor dipped slightly near the east wall and where the overhead light on the left side buzzed for about 2 minutes after you turned it on before settling. He stood in the doorway, his right hand tightened once around the mop handle. Not slowly, not dramatically, just once. A reflex so brief and automatic he was barely aware of it. He stepped into the room. He began mopping. He did not look at the mat again. There are things people carry that cannot be seen by looking at them. Marcus Webb, from the outside, looked like a lean man in a gray uniform doing a job that needed doing. 38 years old, 5'11". The kind of build people called wiry until they watched him load 2 50-pound equipment bags into the storage closet without adjusting his pace, and then they found a different word. or more often found no word at all because the moment passed too fast to examine. He had dark, steady eyes. The kind that moved through a room the way a certain type of person's eyes move, not nervously, not aggressively, but with the low-frequency attention of someone who learned a long time ago that the important things tend to happen at the edges, not at the center, where everyone is already looking. No social media, no presence online, no photographs on his phone except one. His daughter, Deja, 18 years old, captured at her high school graduation the previous May in Memphis. She was laughing at something off to the side, head tilted, one hand raised to push her graduation cap back into place. Marcus had taken 16 photos that day, and this one was the only one where she wasn't posing. He kept it as his lock screen. He had kept it as his lock screen since May. What nobody at Hargrove Combat Academy knew, what Marcus had never told anyone in 3 years of showing up at 4 in the morning and doing his work and going home, was that he had spent 12 years in the United States Army. Not as infantry, not as logistics, not in a support role. He had been an Army combatives instructor, hand to hand. The program designed to teach soldiers what to do when the weapons are gone and the situation has collapsed to its irreducible core and all that remains is a body, a set of trained responses, and whatever is inside a person that refuses to stop. He had achieved Level 4 certification, the highest tier in the modern Army combatives program. He had trained at Fort Moore in Georgia and taught at 3 other installations, including 2 overseas tours where the training was not theoretical. He had personally instructed more than 3,000 soldiers over 12 years. Takedowns, joint locks, choke transitions, the specific science of controlled pressure that ends a confrontation without necessarily ending the person. 3 commendations. An honorable discharge after a shoulder injury that required surgery and 11 months of rehabilitation. And then quiet. He found this apartment on the east side of Atlanta. He found this job. He found a garage where he could be alone with his thoughts, and a heavy bag bolted to a ceiling joist and a green notebook with a cracked spine on the shelf that he hadn't opened in a very long time. He told no one about any of it. Not because he was ashamed. Not because he was hiding, exactly. Because somewhere in the space between Fort Moore and this gym and these floors, Marcus Webb had arrived at a private understanding about what his hands were for now. What they were permitted to be. They were for work. Clean's necessary, uncomplicated work. He finished the training room. He turned off the light. He moved on 6:15. The first car pulled into the lot. Marcus was already in the supply closet, wringing out the mop, back turned to the front of the building. He knew the sound of this place, waking up the way you know the sounds of somewhere you have spent a great deal of time without ever being fully invited into it. The front door chime. The specific footstep pattern of the woman who opened the desk on weekday mornings. The equipment room door with its hinge that nobody had gotten around to oiling. He clocked out at 6:50. He was in his car and gone before the first student pulled into the lot. Ryan Hargrove arrived at 8:15 on Monday mornings. He parked his black G-Wagon diagonally across 2 spaces near the entrance. Not because the lot was crowded, not because he was in a hurry. Because Ryan Hargrove had grown up in a world where the question of whether his convenience might cost someone else theirs had simply never required an answer. He was 28 years old, 6'1", 220 pounds of muscle and confidence, and the specific physical authority that develops when a person has had access to excellent training since the age of 14, and has never had to choose between that training and anything they actually needed. He had his father's jaw and his father's ability to fill a room before saying a word. The black belt around his waist was earned. The record behind it was constructed. Ryan Hargrove had never competed outside the walls of this academy. Not a local tournament, not a regional qualifier, not a single sanctioned bout where the opponent had been selected for anything other than manageability. His highlight reel existed because he had built it carefully in a controlled environment against students who were either too new or too polite or too financially invested in their membership to push back the way a genuine opponent would. His Instagram bio read, undefeated, untested, unstoppable. He had written it himself at 2 in the morning after his 4th drink and had never once found sufficient cause to revise it. He walked through the gym on Monday mornings the way a man walks through something he is already planning to own. One hand trailing along the wall, eyes moving across the space with a kind of proprietary assessment. He pushed into the training room, surveyed the mat, the banners, The equipment laid out for the morning session. The floors were clean. He didn't notice. Clean floors were the baseline. You noticed when they weren't, and you found whoever was responsible, and you expressed your displeasure in whatever way the moment suggested. Marcus was in the far corner, gathering his supply cart, preparing to move on back to the door, unhurried. The kind of presence that a room absorbs without registering, a person so consistently in the background that the eye begins to skip over him the way it skips over furniture. Ryan glanced at him. The mop, he said, to no one in particular, and went to change. Sonja Adler arrived at Hargrove Combat Academy at 5:55 on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings. Never 6, never 5:40. 5:55 every time, with 17 minutes before the class began, and a specific routine for how to use them. Change. Stretch. 3 minutes with her back against the far wall and her eyes closed, running through whatever she needed to set down before she could be fully in her body and on the mat. She was 32 years old. Paralegal at Whitmore and Associates, a mid-size firm in Midtown Atlanta that handled civil litigation and the kind of contractual disputes that were too complicated for small firms and not profitable enough for large ones. She had been doing this job for 9 years. She was very good at it in the specific way that people become very good at something, when they have spent long enough paying close attention to things other people have decided aren't worth their attention. She had been training at Hargrove for 14 months. Not a natural fighter, disciplined and consistent, which at the intermediate level means more than talent. The first thing Sonja had noticed about Marcus Webb was not anything dramatic. It was his hands. The way they were always doing something deliberate, adjusting the angle of a piece of equipment, carrying things that looked heavier than the effort suggested. Moving over a surface with the kind of efficiency that doesn't come from caring about the work, but from having done it so completely that the work and the person have reached some understanding below the level of conscious thought. She had said good morning to him on her 3rd week. He had looked mildly surprised. He said good morning back. That was, for 14 months, the extent of their relationship. But Sonja kept noticing, because some things, once you start noticing them, develop a quality that makes them very difficult to stop noticing. Week 1, Tuesday morning. It started small. Ryan was filming. He did this the way he did most things in the gym, as if the fact of his doing it was sufficient justification. He moved through the main corridor with his phone raised at approximately chest height, half documenting and half performing for an audience that wasn't present, but would be later, on a screen, consuming. Marcus was mopping the corridor, left to right, unhurried. Ryan pointed the phone at him without slowing down, angled the camera back over his shoulder as he passed, held it for about 12 seconds, then lowered it and moved on, the way a person moves on from something they've taken without asking, because it has never occurred to them that asking was part of the transaction. That night, Ryan uploaded it. Caption: even the equipment cleans itself here. 80,000 views in 24 hours. Ryan sat in his apartment and read the comments with the concentrated focus of a man studying data. Some people laughed. A small number said it was wrong. Most people did both at once, which Ryan had come to understand was the optimal response because it meant they felt something, and feeling something meant they kept watching, and watching meant the numbers climbed, and the numbers were what the brand deals were built on. He put the phone down, he picked it back up. People love this, he thought. Not the spinning heel kicks he had spent 6 weeks perfecting, not the technique breakdowns he filmed on Tuesdays. This, the corridor, the mop, the man who didn't look up, the casual, unrehearsed quality of it that was, paradoxically, going to require quite a lot of rehearsal to reproduce consistently. He opened his content calendar. He started planning. Twist 1 arrived on a Tuesday evening through a text message from his daughter. Marcus was at his kitchen table. Rice and black beans, same as most weeknights, because it was inexpensive and reliable, and Marcus had long since made peace with the fact that he was a person who needed his meals to be one less thing to think about. His phone buzzed on the table. He let buzz twice before picking it up. Deja, 18 years old, living with her mother in Memphis. Starting her first semester of college in the fall. Which Marcus thought about with a specific quality of pride that was difficult to separate the awareness of how much she had become her own person, entire and capable, mostly without his being present for it. The message said, "Dad, is that you on TikTok? People are talking about it at school." Marcus put the phone down. He picked up his fork, set it down again. He picked the phone back up and searched until he found the video. 12 seconds. Himself mopping the corridor, unaware, while Ryan's camera drifted over him and kept moving. The caption, the 80,000 views, the comments which he scrolled through once and then stopped scrolling through. He put the phone face down on the table. He thought for a moment. Then he flipped it back over, opened Deeja's message and typed. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted it again. The third time he wrote something short and sent it before he could revise it further. Don't worry about it, baby. How's school going? He finished his dinner. He washed the bowl. He stood at the kitchen sink with the water off and his hands dry, looking at the window that faced a parking lot, and beyond it a chain-link fence, and beyond that a road that went to other roads that went to other parts of the city he rarely had reason to visit. He stood there for a while, not thinking about Ryan Hargrove, not calculating risk or response or what move came next. Thinking about Deeja, at school in Memphis. Seeing her father's image on a screen attached to a caption that turned him into a punchline. And about the question she had asked, which was not really a question about TikTok at all. It was a question about whether her father was okay, whether the world was treating him the way he deserved to be treated, and about the answer he had given, which was not a lie exactly, but was the kind of response that protects the person you're talking to by not giving them the full truth of what you actually know. He went to bed at 9:30. He lay awake until 11:15. Week 2 moved differently. Ryan had a rhythm now, a content calendar and a sense of what worked and the specific energy of a person who has discovered that cruelty performs better than craft, which is a discovery that tends to accelerate once made. The second clip, Marcus holding the door to the equipment room, open as a line of students filed through. Ryan from a distance giving a theatrical bow toward the camera. Caption, even has a doorman, 140,000 views. The third clip, a scuff mark on the training mat. Ryan pointing at it with 2 fingers, then gesturing over his shoulder toward the corridor, the gesture of a man summoning something below his notice. Marcus crossing the floor, kneeling through, working at the mark with a rag while Ryan stood above him with his arms folded, nodding at the camera with the satisfaction of a man confirming something he already believed about the natural order of things. Caption, attention to detail. That's what separates this place. 200,000 views. Brand inquiries arrived in Ryan's direct messages. An energy drink company, a compression wear brand, a supplement company with a track record of attaching itself to exactly this kind of content, the aspirational content, the content that worked by implying without stating that certain people belonged in certain rooms and certain people existed to maintain them for people who belonged there. Ryan replied to all 3 before midnight. Then he lay in bed looking at the ceiling with the specific alert quality of a person whose brain has found something it cannot stop circling. He was thinking about Friday. He had been thinking about Friday since the scuffmark video hit 200,000. Week 2, Friday evening, 5:45, 22 students in the evening class. Sonja Adler in the second row, on time as always, having completed her 3 minutes against the far wall with her eyes closed. Marcus in the corridor outside the training room, working in the steady back and forth that had become so habitual it barely registered as movement anymore. Ryan spotted him through the glass panel in the door. He pushed the door open. Hey! He didn't look at Marcus directly, just pointed at the corridor, a loose backward gesture. Come in, bring the mop. Marcus looked up. He came in, brought the mop. 22 faces turned. A phone came out near the back. Ryan pointed at a scuff mark at the edge of the mat. Same scuff mark, different day. He had walked past it that morning. He had walked past it the afternoon before. He was pointing at it now because there were 22 students watching, and one of them had a phone raised, and Ryan Hargrove understood in the precise commercial way that certain people understand such things, that the moment required an audience to exist at all. You see that? Been there since Tuesday. What exactly am I paying you for? I'll get it right now, sir. You'll get it right now. The voice Ryan used to repeat it back had nothing to do with how Marcus had actually spoken. Higher, smaller, a caricature assembled from assumptions. 3 students laughed. 2 of them looked away immediately after. The way people look away when they've laughed at something that sits wrong a half-second later, but the laugh is already out. Marcus knelt. He worked the mark with a rag from his cart. The mark came off in under 30 seconds because it was a scuff mark and not a stain, and he had the right cleaning agent and 3 years of experience with exactly this kind of floor. Ryan wasn't done. He reached down and took the rag from Marcus's hand. He threw it across the room. It landed near the far wall, against a stack of equipment pads, and lay there like a small punctuation mark. Not clean enough. Use your hands this time. The room made a sound that was not quite silence. The specific altered quality of a space where 22 people have registered something and are each, privately and separately, deciding what to do with that registration. Sanja Adler's hand tightened around her own wrist until she felt her pulse against her fingers. Marcus looked at the spot on the mat. He placed his bare palms on the surface. He wiped. Ryan let this happen for 4 full seconds. Then he looked at his students. Then he looked back down at Marcus. He reached out and patted him on the head. Twice. The loose, easy motion of a man patting something that isn't going to respond to being patted. Good boy, Ryan said. Now get out of my sight. Marcus stood up. His hands were at his sides. Open. Flat. The specific configuration of hands that belong to a person who has made very deliberately the decision not to make them into anything else right now. Not shaking. Not fisted. Not performing steadiness. Simply steady. The way a thing is steady when it has found its actual center of gravity rather than performing one. He picked up his mop. He picked up his rag from where it had landed against the equipment pads. He walked out. He passed Sanja Adler on his way through the door. Sanja had spent 14 years in legal environments reading people. Not the way actors read people for dramatic effect. Not the way novelists read people for material. But the way a person reads people when their professional function depends on understanding what is actually happening in a room as opposed to what the room's most powerful person has decided is happening. She had seen grief that held itself upright and smiling. She had seen rage wearing the face of patience. She had seen, more times than she could count, the expression that appears on a person's face when they are deciding, in real time, what kind of person they intend to be. Marcus's expression as he passed her was not any of those. It was something harder to name. Something that lived in the space between what a person feels and what they permit themselves to become because of what they feel. Control, yes, but not the absence of something. The presence of a decision so complete it had stopped looking like a decision and started looking like a fact. She watched him turn the corner and disappear. She looked back at Ryan, who was already talking to the student nearest him, already on to the next thing, already in the part of the story where this moment was finished and filed and did not require further consideration. Sonja looked down at her phone. She did not take a video, not yet, but she opened the camera. She turned the resolution up to the highest setting. She turned off the automatic shutoff so the screen would stay active, and then she put it in the pocket closest to her dominant hand, where she could reach it in under 2 seconds without looking, just in case. That night, Ryan uploaded the head pat video. Caption: when the janitor tries to join the big boys. 200,000 views by morning. Comments splitting between people who thought it was funny and people who thought it was wrong, and a third group, the largest group, who thought it was both and kept watching anyway because both was more interesting than either alone. Ryan's follower count crossed 65,000. He lay in bed reading comments until 1 in the morning. Then he put the phone on his chest and stared at the ceiling and thought about numbers and about Friday and about how much further this could go if he was willing to keep going. He was willing to keep going. Week 3, Monday morning. Ryan stopped Marcus in the main hallway before the cleaning shift was finished. I need you at the morning session to hold a kick pad. Marcus looked at him. Not challenging, not deferential, just looking. The way a person looks when they are taking in information and have not yet decided what to respond to first. He did not say yes. But he did not walk away, because walking away from a direct instruction from the son of the man who controlled his employment was a luxury that $14 an hour did not reliably afford. Marcus Webb was a man who understood the arithmetic of his situation with the complete, unromantic clarity of someone who had never had the option of not understanding it. He held the pad. Ryan kicked it with everything he had. The force moved through the pad and through Marcus's arms and through his shoulders and drove him 2 steps backward until his back found the wall. He absorbed it without going down, which required more than the students watching could probably calculate because they had never been on the receiving end of a kick like that while holding pads and wearing work boots with flat heels. 3 phones came out. Someone near the back laughed. Ryan looked at the cameras. Caption that night, even the mop can be useful sometimes. 300,000 views. Tuesday morning, the front desk handed Marcus a new schedule. She didn't look at him when she did it. She had the expression of a person performing a task they have been instructed to perform and have decided the most ethical path through it is to perform it quickly and completely without making eye contact. Marcus looked at the paper. 15 fewer hours per week. He did the math in the way people do the math when their relationship with money is something more immediate than theoretical. $14 an hour, 15 hours, 4 weeks. $840 per month, no longer incoming. His rent was $900, due in 9 days. He folded the schedule, put it in his back pocket, went to the supply closet. He started his shift 20 minutes early. Wednesday afternoon, Sonsanja was in the small storage room adjacent to the supply closet, retrieving her gym bag from where she'd left it after Monday's session. She was reaching for the strap when she heard Ryan's voice through the wall. She stopped. The wall between the storage room and the supply closet was drywall over old framing. She could hear the individual words clearly enough that she didn't need to strain. Ryan, my dad's been talking about cutting the cleaning budget, restructuring. It's just business. A pause. But I could put in a word. Make sure your position stays secure. A longer pause. The particular silence of someone not filling space. Ryan again. The performance gone from his voice the way paint comes off when the surface underneath it is wet. All you gotta do is show up when I ask. On camera. Nothing complicated. Then Marcus's voice. Quiet. Steady. The same register he used when he said good morning and when he said yes, sir, and when he said almost done like something far away and very certain of itself. I just want to do my job, sir. And Ryan's voice. Flattened now. All the warmth of performance gone. That wasn't a question. Footsteps. The supply closet door open. Closed. Sonia did not move for 4 full seconds. Then she looked at her phone. The voice memos app was open. She had no conscious memory of opening it. Her thumb had found the record button before her brain completed the sentence describing why it should. 14 years of professional instinct operating below the level of deliberate thought, arriving at the right answer before the conscious mind got around to asking the question. She pressed stop. She saved the file. She named it Wednesday Supply Room. She stood there looking at the name on the screen. Then she opened her text messages. She found the contact for an old law school classmate, a woman named Philippa who had gone into public interest law and now worked at a legal aid nonprofit 3 miles from where Sanja was standing. She typed a message, deleted it, typed another, deleted that. The third version was 3 sentences. I need your help. Something bad is happening at my gym. I don't know exactly how bad yet, but I think I need to be ready. The reply came in 4 minutes. Ready for what? Sanja looked at the thin wall between her and the supply closet. For whatever comes next, she typed. I'm going to keep recording until I know. She put the phone in her bag. She picked up her gym bag. She walked out of the storage room and through the corridor and out the side exit without speaking to anyone. Behind her, the supply closet was quiet again. Thursday evening. Week 4. Ryan posted an Instagram story. Black background, white text, no filter, no music, the aesthetic of something that wants to be taken seriously. He had drafted it 4 times. The final version was 2 frames. First frame, Friday Night Live, giving the mop a lesson he'll never forget. Second frame, the gym's address. 8 o'clock, sharp. He watched the view count climb while he ate dinner, 40,000 by the time he finished. 60 by the time he went to shower. He kept checking between tasks, the number going up with the specific rhythm of something that had found its current. Comments split the way comments always split. A third laughing. A third objecting. A third doing both at the same time and being the loudest about it. All of them watched. All of them shared. The objecting ones most of all because outrage was its own kind of algorithm, its own kind of fuel. Ryan went to bed at 11, satisfied with the shape of what was coming. Marcus saw the story at 11:15. He was at his kitchen table with a cup of tea he had not drunk, looking at nothing in particular, in the specific state of stillness that comes to a person after a long day when their body is ready to stop, but their mind has not yet received the signal. He opened Instagram. He read the story once, read it again. He sat with it for a moment, then he opened his banking app, $412. He looked at that number the way a person looks at weather, as information rather than opinion, requiring acknowledgement without requiring performance. He opened Deeja's contact. He transferred $150. For the textbook she'd mentioned twice in passing, and he'd been meaning to take care of, and tonight felt like a night for taking care of things he'd been meaning to take care of. He added a note, for school, don't argue. Then he opened a new message to her. He typed it carefully, the way you type something when you know it might be the last message in a series and you want it to be the right one. Whatever happens this week, just know your dad never started a fight in his life. He read it back once. He sent it. He turned off the kitchen light. He walked to the garage. The garage was the same as it had always been. A single bulb on a pull chain. The heavy bag in the corner. Bought 4 years ago from a sporting goods liquidation sale. Vinyl cracked at the top. Chain bolted into a ceiling joist that Marcus had reinforced himself when he moved in because the original hardware wasn't rated for the load. He had not struck this bag in 6 years. He walked up to it. He did not raise his hands. He placed both palms flat against the side of the bag. Fingers spread. Full contact. The way you might place your hands on a wall to feel if it's warm. He could feel the texture of the worn vinyl, the slight resistance of the filling underneath, the faint movement of the chain above. He stood there with his forehead touching the bag, breathing. He was not preparing, not warming up, not running through sequences the way he used to run through them in the years when running through sequences was part of what made him himself. He was asking a question, a specific question that had been waiting 6 years for the right moment to be asked directly. A question about whether the person he had been before Fort Moore, and the person who had been mopping floors for 3 years, and the person who was going to walk into Hargrove Combat Academy tomorrow evening were all the same person, and whether that person could be trusted with what he carried. He stood there for 11 minutes. He knew it was 11 minutes because he counted his breaths and he breathed at a rate he knew by long habit. Then he lifted his head, he stepped back, he looked at his hands in the dim light, he pulled the chain. The bulb went out. He went inside, lay down on his bed fully dressed, and looked at the ceiling until the ceiling became something other than the ceiling, and he was somewhere else, and then nowhere, and then asleep. Friday, 4 in the morning. The alarm went off, one quiet pulse, and Marcus's hand was already moving toward it before the second one could sound. He sat up, he sat on the edge of the bed with his hands on his knees and his eyes adjusting to the dark, not gathering himself, not performing calm, just present in the specific, unsentimental way of a man who has decided something and is now simply in the part of the day that comes after the decision. He showered. He pressed his gray uniform. He had not pressed it yesterday. He could not have said exactly why he pressed it today, except that there was a version of this evening where things went a certain way, and if they did, he wanted to walk into them looking like himself, not like someone who had been caught off guard, like someone who had shown up on purpose. He pinned the name tag. He looked at it in the bathroom mirror. Marcus Webb. 2 words that had been on a gray uniform in a gym hallway for 3 years and had not until recently been on anything else. He made coffee. He drank it standing at the kitchen counter, looking at nothing, which was a habit so old he'd stopped noticing it. He left the apartment at 3:45. The city at this hour was the version of itself that most of its residents never saw. Streetlights doing their patient work over empty intersections. The distant sound of the interstate that never fully slept, just lowered its voice for a few hours around 3. His Civic, 12 years old with a dent in the rear quarter panel, sitting alone in the small lot behind his building. He drove to Hargrove Combat Academy. He parked in the back, same as always, same space, same distance from the service entrance. He unlocked the back door with his key. He went to the supply closet. He got the cart, got the mop, filled the bucket. He started with the main hallway, left to right, right to left, and while he mopped, he thought about Kendrick Farrell. He thought about Kendrick Farrell the way he thought about him every morning, which was not obsessively, not with the sharp edge of fresh guilt, but with the steady low-grade awareness of someone who carries something they have decided they do not have the right to put down. 24 years old, first year at Fort Moore, good instincts, hard worker, the kind of young soldier who made you glad you'd chosen to be the person who got to teach him. A demo, a technique Marcus had run 400 times or more without incident. A small disturbance in the corner of the room. 2 soldiers arguing. Nothing serious. Nothing requiring intervention. The kind of peripheral event that Marcus's trained attention had redirected away from successfully in 1,000 prior sessions. Except once, half a second, wrong angle of pressure. 2 degrees of error in a technique where 2 degrees mattered. Kendrick's collarbone, surgery, 3 months, full recovery. The review board, which Marcus had sat before expecting discipline and had instead been told it was an accident. The evidence was clear. No findings against him. He was free to go. True. 3 weeks later, he submitted his discharge papers. He told people it was the shoulder. It was not the shoulder. He was thinking about this when he reached the door of the training room. He looked through the glass panel at the mat in the dark. True. He had looked through this same glass panel on approximately 750 mornings and had felt, each time, the particular quality of looking at something you are not quite willing to look at directly. He pushed the door open. He mopped the training room for the last time. And across the city, Sonja Adler's alarm was going off. She turned it off without fumbling, which was unusual, which meant she had been waiting for it rather than sleeping through it. She lay still for a moment. Then she reached for her phone and checked that the files from the last 3 weeks backed up to her cloud storage correctly. They had. All of them. Every clip, the storage room audio, the metadata she had assembled with the patient thoroughness of someone who had spent 9 years building cases from fragments. She plugged the phone in to ensure a full charge. She was not a fighter. She had never claimed to be. But she had spent 14 years understanding that the most important thing in any room was usually the thing nobody had thought to document. And tonight, she was going to be in the front row of that room, with a fully charged phone and a resolution setting she had never used before Friday. Because something was going to happen tonight to a man who pressed his uniform before a shift and sent his daughter money for textbooks and had not, in 3 years of daily proximity to people treating him like furniture, started a single fight. And somebody needed to be ready to show the world exactly what they'd see. By 6 o'clock, the supply closet was restocked, and the floors were finished, and the parking lot had begun to fill with cars that should not have been there yet, people arriving an hour and a half early for something that didn't start until 8. Marcus clocked out. He went to his car. He sat in it. He did not start the engine. He opened his phone. Deja had replied to his message from last night. He had known she would reply, because Deja never let a message sit. She engaged with everything immediately and completely. It was one of the ways she was entirely unlike him. She had written, "Dad, I know. I've always known that. Come home soon, okay?" He read it 3 times. Then he put the phone in the glove compartment. He leaned his head back against the headrest. He closed his eyes. The building hummed around him. The parking lot filled up behind him. And on the central mat inside, which Marcus had cleaned at 4 in the morning on his hands and knees in the dark, something was assembled and waiting that no content calendar had actually planned for. Tonight, at 8 o'clock, Ryan Hargrove was going to give the mop a lesson. He had promised 40,000 people. He was right about one thing, only one thing. The lesson was coming. He just had the wrong idea about who was going to learn it. The parking lot filled before the front doors opened. 6:15. And already there were people Marcus had never seen. Not students. Not regulars. People who had driven from other parts of Atlanta because an Instagram story told them something worth watching was happening at 8 o'clock inside this building. They were right about that. They were wrong about almost everything else. By 6:30, 40 people pressed around the central mat. Students in training gear. Friends of friends in streetwear. A man near the back who had parked in the fire lane and showed no intention of moving. The air inside had changed. Thicker. The particular atmosphere of a room where everyone has agreed, without saying it aloud, that something is about to happen, and they have arrived early to make sure they have a good position when it does. Ryan had set up 3 cameras, 1 wide angle, 1 tight on the mat. One on a gimbal held by Travis, his friend and unofficial videographer, and the person who had laughed at every joke Ryan had told since they were 17, which was either loyalty or calculation and probably some of both. The live stream went live at 6:20. 2,000 viewers, then 6. Then 10, then 14,000 people watching a gym in Atlanta on a Friday evening because the internet had decided, collectively and without much deliberation, that this was going to be entertaining. Ryan stood at the center of the mat in a pressed black G with his name embroidered on the chest in gold thread. He shadowboxed for the wide camera, rolled his neck, bounced on the balls of his feet with the easy energy of a man who has decided the outcome in advance and is now simply waiting for the story to catch up to his ending. He looked exactly like a man about to perform, because that is exactly what he thought this was. Sonja Adler was in the second row, phone in both hands, 4K resolution, automatic shutoff disabled. She had arrived at 6 and taken the position with the clearest sightline to both the mat and the hallway door. Her jaw was set. Her hands were the hands of someone who has assigned themselves one job and made it the only thing that matters right now. Marcus was in the back hallway, finishing his shift. He had stayed in the building all day. Not because anyone asked him to. Because there was a version of tonight where he went home and sat in his apartment and found out what happened through a screen at 11 o'clock. And there was this version, where he was present in his uniform, with his name tag on. He had chosen this version the way you choose something that costs you something, deliberately, without pretending it doesn't. He finished the back corridor, wrung out the mops, set it against the wall. He stood in the hallway listening to the sound coming from the training room. 40 people and the hum of live stream equipment, and Ryan's voice already performing, already somewhere other than honest. Marcus breathed in through his nose, out through his mouth. Once, the training room door opened and 2 students came into the hallway. They didn't grab him, they weren't rough about it, but they positioned themselves on either side in a way that made the available directions clear. Marcus looked at each of them in turn. He picked up the mop. He walked with them. The room went partially quiet when he appeared. Not completely, but enough. The half-silence that happens when 40 people see the thing they came to see and haven't yet decided how they feel about seeing it. Marcus moved through the crowd, 40 faces, some grinning, some with phones raised, a few looking somewhere other than at him, the particular avoidance of people who have shown up to something they are not entirely comfortable having shown up to. Ryan looked him over. Work boots worn flat at the heels, gray uniform, name tag still pinned to the chest, hands hanging loose at his sides. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan spread his arms wide, working the room and the cameras simultaneously, the gesture of a man who has practiced this kind of welcome until it looked like it came naturally. Tonight's special guest. Someone in the back whistled. Someone else said something that got a laugh. Marcus did not look at the crowd. He looked at Ryan. The same steady eyes he had carried through 3 weeks of this. Not angry, not afraid. Something that existed on the other side of both of those things. Something that required a different word that most people in that room did not currently have access to. "You ready, Mop?" Ryan said. Marcus stepped onto the mat. Ryan settled into his stance. Orthodox. Left foot forward, hands high, chin tucked. It was a technically sound stance, the product of years of genuine instruction by people who knew what they were teaching. He bounced twice, feinted a jab, the performance of readiness. Marcus stood flat-footed, no stance, no guard, hands at his sides. Weight distributed across both feet in a way that looked, to most of the 40 people in that room, like a man who had never been on a mat in his life. To anyone who had spent significant time at a serious training facility, it looked like something else entirely. It looked like a man who had already decided how the next 30 seconds were going to go and was simply extending the courtesy of letting the other person begin. Ryan attacked. A roundhouse kick, fast, full extension, aimed at the ribs. The same kick that had driven Marcus into the wall on Monday when Marcus was holding a pad and had nowhere to move. This time Marcus wasn't holding anything. He sidestepped. 1 step, clean, economical. The kick passed his hip with 2 inches to spare, and Ryan's momentum carried him a quarter turn off balance for just under 1 second. Not very long. Long enough. Marcus closed the distance in 1 stride. His level dropped through. His shoulder drove into Ryan's hip. Both hands locked behind Ryan's knee. He lifted and turned in a single motion, and Ryan left the ground in the particular way that people leave the ground when they have no preparation for it and no control over what comes next. Ryan hit the mat on his back. The sound was not dramatic. It was flat and solid and final, the sound a body makes when it meets a surface without negotiation. 3 full seconds of complete silence. Not partial, complete. The live stream chat was still moving, but nobody in the room was looking at screens anymore. Marcus was already there. Side control, his chest pressing across Ryan's torso, his right arm threading beneath Ryan's chin, his left hand locking behind Ryan's head, the rear naked choke, the technique he had drilled across 12 years and 3 continents and in rooms that's like nothing similar to this one, applied at partial pressure, enough to hold, not enough to harm. He held it and waited. Ryan's hands came up immediately, clawing at Marcus's forearm, with the frantic energy of someone whose body has understood the situation before their mind has fully caught up. His legs kicked, his shoulders shifted. He was strong, he was trained. None of it changed the geometry of what was happening because the geometry was not negotiable. "Get off me." Marcus adjusted his grip a quarter inch. His breathing was unchanged from when he'd walked through the door. "Get off me," I said. 10 seconds. Ryan's hands stopped clawing, and then they went flat, and then they tapped. Once, twice, 3 times against Marcus's forearm, the signal that exists in every training room in the world because it needs no translation. I submit. I'm done. Stop. Marcus held for 1 more second, not from cruelty, not to extend the performance. 1 second so that every camera in that room, and there were several, could register without ambiguity exactly what had happened and what it meant. Then he released. He stood up, he stepped back, he walked to the edge of the mat, picked up his mop from where he had set it by the hallway door, turned toward the supply closet. He did not speak. He did not look at the cameras or the crowd or the live stream. He did not flex, did not point, did not raise a hand or make a sound or acknowledge by any gesture whatsoever that 40 people and 14,000 online had just watched something that would be discussed for a very long time. He walked away with the mop, like a man finishing his shift. The gym stayed silent for 3 full seconds. Then a single person in the back row began to clap. 1 person, then 2. Then the sound moved through the room the way certain sounds move, like something physical, like pressure, like the collective exhale of people who have been holding their breath without realizing it until the moment they stopped. The live stream chat became a wall of text moving too fast for any individual word to be legible. The same question peering in 100 different phrasings. Who is he? Who is he? Who is he? Ryan sat on the mat, alone, his geets. His belt had come completely loose and lay beside him like a thing he had dropped. His hands were flat on the floor. He did not stand up for a long time, not because he was injured, because something had happened that he did not have a framework for yet, and his body had decided, without consulting him, to stay on the floor while his mind went about the work of building one. Victor Hargrove stood at the back of the room near the service entrance, arms crossed, face expressionless, phone already in his hand, scrolling to a contact because Victor Hargrove was, above all things, a businessman, and what he had just watched was a situation that needed to be managed before it became something it could not be managed back from. Sonja lowered her phone. 4 minutes and 19 seconds. She saved it twice, once to the phone and once to the cloud backup she had configured 3 days ago specifically for this. She looked at the thumbnail. Marcus stepping through the crowd with the mop. The 40-second. Marcus walking back out. She opened Twit, a caption. 2 words and a hashtag. Watch this. Quiet man, she attached the video. She pressed post. Then she put her phone in her bag, picked up her gym bag, and walked out without speaking to anyone. The numbers move the way water moves when it finds an opening. 2 million views before midnight, 7 million by Saturday morning, 16 million by Saturday evening. By Sunday, the clip existed on every platform simultaneously, downloaded and reposted and stitched and analyzed by former fighters and retired military personnel and sports journalists who had not planned to spend their weekend thinking about a janitor in Atlanta, but found they couldn't stop. Because there was something in those 40 seconds that resisted being looked away from. Not just the technique, though the technique was clean enough to stop experienced people mid-scroll. It was the walk away, the mop, the name tag still pinned to his chest, the total, absolute, zero performance quality of what he had done in a room that had been constructed entirely around performance. A retired fighter posted a breakdown video. Look at the entry, he said, playing it at half speed, leaning toward his camera. Look at the level change. Look at the positioning and side control. Whoever this man is, he has trained at a very high level for a very long time, and he used exactly what the situation required, not 1 ounce more. That clip gathered 1 million views before Sunday ended. Marcus Webb was becoming known. He didn't know it yet. He was asleep in his apartment on the east side of Atlanta, in the specific deep sleep of a person who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has, for 1 night, been allowed to set it down. 7:15. The coffee had gone cold. Marcus had poured it 20 minutes ago and had not drunk any of it because his phone had been buzzing since before he came to the table, and he had been managing the buzzing with the focused deliberateness of a man who has decided that whatever is on the other end of those calls can wait until he has had his coffee. Except the coffee had gone cold. He picked up the phone on the next buzz. Unknown number. Atlanta area code, he answered. The voice on the other end was calibrated, professional. The voice of someone trained to deliver difficult news in language so formal it sounds like procedure rather than threat. Mr. Webb, this is the office of Whitfield and Associates, representing the Hargrove family. We are filing a civil complaint against you for aggravated assault. intentional infliction of emotional distress, and tortious interference with business operations. You will be served by end of day. We strongly advise you to retain legal counsel immediately. The line went dead. Marcus set the phone on the table. He looked at the cold coffee. He thought about the word assault. He had spent 12 years teaching people the precise difference between force and harm. He had certified at the highest level available in his field. He understood the distinction between what he had done on that mat and what the word being used to describe it actually meant. He knew. But knowing something and being able to afford to defend it in a courtroom were two entirely different things. And Marcus Webb, sitting at his kitchen table with $412 in his bank account and a cold cup of coffee, understood that difference with perfect and unsentimental clarity. He got up. He poured the coffee down the drain. He made a new cup. He drank it standing up. By noon, Victor Hargrove was behind a cluster of microphones outside the academy, Navy suit. His lawyer, Harold Whitfield, silver-haired and cuff-linked, stood to his left. Ryan stood to his right. His arm was in a sling. His eyes were red in the specific way get when someone has been practicing being upset rather than actually experiencing it. Last night, Victor said, an employee of this academy, a man hired to clean these floors, attacked my son during a routine training session. He paused, the pause of a man who has rehearsed this. My son suffered physical and psychological injuries at the hands of someone we trusted to be part of this community. This was not self-defense. This was a premeditated assault by a man with specialized military training. We will pursue the fullest extent of the law. Ryan stepped forward, voice low, eyes down, the product of significant preparation. I was just trying to run a good class. I invited him up because I thought it would be a positive experience. He agreed to participate. He stopped, let the pause do work, and then he just came at me. I tapped because I genuinely believed he was going to kill me. I can't sleep. I keep seeing his face. He touched the sling with his free hand. 3 local news stations ran it live. By 4 in the afternoon, one channel's lower third caption read, Atlanta gym janitor accused of attacking instructor in unprovoked assault. Not one station mentioned the TikTok videos. Not one mentioned the head pat. Not one mentioned the storage room. Not one called Marcus Webb. Victor Hargrove's public relations firm had been working since 11 o'clock the previous night. They were very good at their jobs. The story had been shaped and framed and delivered before anyone with a different version of it had been given a platform to speak. The internet divided, the way it always divides, loudly, completely, along lines that had less to do with the specific facts and more to do with what each person had already decided before they arrived at the facts. On one side, Sonja's clip, the 40 seconds. 20 million people who had watched it and felt something they couldn't quite name but were certain about. On the other side, the press conference, Ryan's voice. The word assault repeated in enough headlines with enough frequency that it began to feel, through sheer repetition, like an established thing. Comment sections became excavation sites. The shift was visible if you dug into the timestamps. Friday night, who is this man? What just happened? He walked away with a mop. Saturday afternoon, trained military combatant attacks civilian. Doesn't matter who started it. Both things were present simultaneously. And while the internet argued about what it had seen, Marcus Webb's actual life was coming apart in the quiet, practical, unglamorous way that lives come apart when the systems holding them up are removed one at a time. Monday morning, 7:45. Marcus arrived at Hargrove for his shift. The front desk handed him an envelope without looking at him. He opened it in the parking lot. One paragraph. Legal language carefully chosen to say the necessary thing and nothing else. Due to conduct unbecoming of a staff member and pending legal action, your employment is hereby terminated effective immediately. Please return all company property to the front desk upon receipt of this notice. He stood in the lot with the letter in his hand. The morning was gray and still. The lot that had been crowded with unfamiliar cars on Friday night was empty except for 2 vehicles belonging to staff who hadn't yet come out to discover he was there. He went inside. He returned the uniform, the keys, the name tag, which he unpinned from his chest and set on the counter with the specific care of someone setting down something they have carried for a long time and are now, regardless of circumstance, done carrying. The front desk did not look at him. He walked back to his car. He sat in it, the engine off, the morning quiet around him. He looked at the building through the windshield for a moment. This place he had unlocked at 4 in the morning for 3 years, and had never once been invited to think of as anything other than somewhere he worked. Then he started the engine. He drove home. Tuesday afternoon, his landlord called. The man's voice carried the specific quality of someone delivering news they would prefer not to be delivering and have decided the most humane approach is to do it quickly. Marcus, I want you to know I'm not trying to make things harder for you. A pause. But your face has been on the news, and I've had other tenants asking questions. I think we need to talk about you finding somewhere else to be. 48 hours. Informal. After that, formal. His account, $412. Rent, $900. Income as of Monday morning, none. He put the phone on the counter. He stood at the window. The view from his window was a parking lot, and beyond it a chain-link fence, and beyond that a road that led somewhere he didn't have a particular reason to go. He stood there for a long time in the specific stillness of a person who has too many things pressing on them simultaneously to address any single one. So the body chooses stillness while the mind goes about the overwhelming work of triage. His phone buzzed. DJ. Dad, they're calling you violent on the news. I know you're not. You're not dangerous. You're not. Please call me. Marcus sat down on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, legs straight out on the linoleum. The ceiling had a watermark near the light fixture he'd been meaning to mention to the landlord for 8 months, and now would never mention. He looked at the ceiling for a while, not because he was giving up, because he needed 30 seconds where he was not required to be doing anything at all before he went back to doing everything that was required. He typed back, I'm okay, don't worry about me. I'll call you tonight, I love you. He sent it. He got up off the floor. He washed his face at the kitchen sink. He put water on for coffee. He stood at the stove watching the pot, and he did not cry. Not because he didn't feel it, but because crying was a direction, and he did not yet have a direction, and he had learned, in 12 years of doing difficult things in difficult conditions, to wait for the direction before he moved. Wednesday evening, 9 o'clock. A knock at the door. Marcus opened it. Sanja Adler stood in the hallway in the blazer she'd worn to work that morning. Next to her was a man Marcus had never seen, 51 years old, tall, gray at the temples, a leather messenger bag over one shoulder with the worn quality of something that had been a lot of places and had developed, through use, a kind of authority. Marcus, Sanja said, this is Garrett Wynn. He's an attorney. Former military JAG, 14 years. He does pro bono work for veterans. She stopped. Then, can we come in? Marcus looked at Garrett. Garrett looked back, not sizing him up. Not performing confidence. The steady look of a man who has already done his assessment and arrived at a conclusion, and is here because of what the conclusion was. Come in, Marcus said. They sat at the kitchen table. Garrett opened his laptop without preamble. He played the footage in sequence. The first corridor clip, the head pat video, the kickpad session. The storage room audio, which made Marcus go very still for a moment, because he had not known Sanja had recorded it. The Instagram story announcing Friday Night Live. And then Sanja's footage from Friday. 4 minutes and 19 seconds, starting from the moment the training room door opened and ending with Marcus walking out with the mop. Garrett closed the laptop. He folded his hands. 3 things, he said. His voice had the quality of someone who chooses words the way a builder chooses materials for what they can hold rather than how they look. First, they brought you onto that mat. You did not volunteer. The footage establishes this without ambiguity. Under Georgia law, what was done to bring you onto that mat constitutes coercion, and it invalidates any claim that you initiated contact or consented to participation. Their entire premise collapses at the foundation. He opened the laptop again. He played the 40 seconds at half speed. Second, 0 strikes. From the moment you stepped on that mat to the moment you stepped off, you did not throw a single punch, elbow, knee, or kick. Every technique you applied was a control hold at partial pressure. You released immediately upon submission. I have watched this footage 31 times. There is not one frame that supports the word they are using. He closed the laptop. He reached into his bag. He produced a folder and slid it across the table. Marcus opened it. 3 documents. Filed complaints, names, dates, case numbers. Georgia Secretary of State's Office, Licensing Division. Third, Hargrove Combat Academy has 4 prior complaints on file, all from former students, all alleging coerced participation, physical intimidation, and retaliatory treatment of students who objected. All 4 were settled privately with non-disclosure agreements and financial payments. No press coverage. The Hargrove family assumed nobody would look for them. Marcus turned a page. How did you find these? Public records. The complaints are indexed. The settlements are sealed, but the complaints exist, and they are accessible. Garrett leaned forward slightly. Marcus, you are not the defendant in this story. You are the evidence. Every video they posted, every dollar they made from your humiliation, every person they pressured into silence before you. That is a pattern, and a pattern is what a case is built on. He extended his hand across the table. I'll take your case. No fee, no condition. The only thing I need from you is everything that's true. Marcus looked at the hand. He looked at the termination letter still on the corner of the table, where it had been since Monday morning, where he had set it and not moved it because moving it felt like doing something with it that he wasn't ready to do. He looked at the folder. He looked at Garrett. Before you decide, Marcus said, there's something I need to tell you first. Garrett waited. Sanja waited. The upstairs neighbor was moving around. The small domestic sounds of someone's ordinary evening pressing through the ceiling into this kitchen where something else entirely was happening. Marcus put both hands flat on the table. He looked at them. 6 years ago, he said, last training session I ran at Fort Moore. I had a soldier in the class named Kendrick Farrell, 24 years old, first year, good instincts, solid work ethic, exactly the kind of student that makes you remember why you wanted to do this job. He paused. I was demonstrating a control technique. Basic application, I had run the same demo close to 400 times. There was a situation in the corner of the room, 2 soldiers having a small disagreement. Nothing serious. Nothing that required my attention. He stopped. I looked. Half a second. Maybe less than that. Wrong angle of pressure. Wrong trajectory by maybe 2 degrees. He paused again. Kendrick's collarbone broke. He had surgery. 3 months of recovery. He recovered completely. The kitchen was quiet. Nobody held me formally responsible. The review board closed the file. Kendrick himself told them it was an accident, which it was. Marcus was still looking at his hands. I submitted my discharge papers 3 weeks later. I told people it was the shoulder injury. That was not true. He looked up. I haven't been on a training mat in 6 years because I didn't trust what these hands could do anymore. I took this job because it was quiet and it was work and nobody here needed me to be anything other than someone who showed up on time and did the job right. That was manageable. That was something I understood how to do. Garrett had not moved. Friday night was the first time in 6 years I used any of it. A long silence. Garrett, and what happened Friday night? Marcus looked at his hands one final time. Then he looked at Garrett directly. The same direct quality he had carried across 3 weeks of being treated like furniture. Unchanged, unperformed, entirely I'm ashamed of. Garrett nodded once. The deliberate nod of a man who has just heard the specific thing he needed to hear and understands exactly what it means for everything that comes next. Then let's go to court. Sanja exhaled, not loudly. The quiet exhale of someone who has been holding something carefully for a long time and has just found a place where it is safe to set it down. Marcus signed the representation agreement on his kitchen table. The same table where he ate his meals and looked at his daughter's photo on his lock screen and sat in the dark after the landlord called. He signed with the pen Garrett produced from the inside pocket of the messenger bag, a pen that had been used to sign 11 similar agreements over 4 years. Though Marcus didn't know that, Sanja transferred all the footage and the storage room audio to Garrett's secure server before she left. She stood in the doorway on her way out. You okay? She said. Marcus considered this with the seriousness the question deserved. Getting there, he said. She nodded. Left. Marcus sat alone. The folder was in front of him. The representation agreement was in front of him. He picked up the termination letter from the corner of the table and put it underneath the folder, so he didn't have to look at it anymore. Not avoidance, just priority. Some things could wait. He opened his phone. He went to Deeja's contact and looked at the message he had sent her Thursday night before Friday, before all of it. Whatever happens this week, just know your dad never started a fight in his life. He started typing. This time he did not delete it. He told her about Fort Moore, about Kendrick Farrell and a collarbone and 2 degrees of error and a review board that found nothing wrong with him, and 3 weeks later an office where he signed papers that said he was leaving. He told her about the garage and the heavy bag he hadn't touched, and 6 years of being careful with himself in a way that looked like something else from the outside. He told her that Friday night, for the first time, he had stepped back onto a mat and trusted what he found there. He told her he was okay. He told her he had help. He sent it at 12:58 in the morning. At 1:07, Deeja replied. Dad, I already knew you were a good man. I have always known that. Now I know why you are. Ooh. Then, a few seconds later, a second message. Also, I Googled what a rear naked choke is, and I have several questions, and also I am very proud of you. Marcus set the phone down on the table. He sat in the quiet apartment in the small hours of a Thursday morning, with the folder and the signed agreement, and the cold quiet of a place where something had shifted. Not dramatically. Not with noise. But in the way real things shift. Below the surface. Permanent. And for the first time since Monday morning, Marcus Webb smiled. The hearing was set for 6 weeks out. Fulton County Civil Court, 9 in the morning. Marcus had 6 weeks. He spent them the way he had spent the last 3 years, doing the work. A temporary cleaning position through a staffing agency in Midtown. $12 an hour, 3 days a week. Not enough. Enough to matter. He met with Garrett twice more. He answered every question fully and without elaboration, in the direct way of someone who has decided that truth is most useful when it is not dressed up to be more or less than it is. Garrett asked him once, toward the end of their second meeting, "Is there anything in this situation that you regret?" Marcus thought about it. Actually thought about it, which meant not answering immediately. "I regret how long I stayed quiet," he said finally. "Not Friday night. The weeks before, I kept telling myself that absorbing it without reacting was the dignified thing. I think what it actually was invisible, and I'd already been invisible long enough." Garrett wrote that down. Marcus didn't ask why. He suspected it would be relevant. Tuesday evening, the night before the hearing. Marcus pressed his charcoal suit on his kitchen table, using a folded dish towel as a pressing cloth the way his mother had shown him when he was 11 years old. The suit was 8 years old. He had bought it for a friend's wedding in Savannah. The shoulders still fit. The sleeves ran half an inch short, which was noticeable if you were looking for it. He hung it on the back of the bedroom door. He looked at it for a moment. Then he went to the garage. He stood in front of the heavy bag. He did not ask himself the question he had asked 6 weeks ago. He already knew the answer to that question. He had known it since the moment on Friday night, when his shoulder connected with Ryan Hargrove's hip, and everything his body had been trained to do had arrived without hesitation, without error, without the half-second lapse that had sent him to a discharge office 6 years before. He raised his hands, and for the second time in 6 years, Marcus Webb moved. Not fast, not hard, the quiet reacquaintance of a man with something he thought he had given up for good, hip transitions, level changes. The specific economy of motion that lives in a body below conscious thought, the place where 12 years of training had deposited itself and waited without complaint. He worked for 40 minutes. When he stopped, his shirt was damp and the chain above the bag was still swinging and the garage smelled like effort. He looked at his hands. Same hands. He turned off the light. Tomorrow, a judge in Fulton County was going to watch the same 40 seconds that 20 million people had already seen. Marcus had already decided what those 40 seconds meant. They meant he had been standing in that building for 3 years. In plain sight, in the same gray uniform with the same crooked name tag. And the only mistake he had made was allowing himself to believe that invisible and safe were the same thing. They were not. He had learned that. Tomorrow, he was going to walk into a courtroom in a suit with sleeves half an inch too short, and he was going to be exactly, completely, and without apology, visible. Whatever came next, he was ready. Wednesday morning, 8:17. Marcus Webb sat in the parking garage beneath Fulton County Civil Court and looked at his hands, not nervously, not performing calm for some invisible audience inside his own head, just looking. The way he had looked at them in the garage last night after 40 minutes with the heavy bag. The way he had looked at them 6 years ago in a training room at Fort Moore when Kendrick Farrell was being helped off the mat by 2 soldiers who didn't yet understand what had happened. Same hands. Different day. Different kind of reckoning. He got out of the car. The suit fit through the shoulders. That was what mattered. Garrett had said nothing about the sleeves when they'd met Tuesday afternoon to go over the final preparation. Either he hadn't noticed or he'd decided it wasn't worth saying. And both options suited Marcus equally well. The tie was dark green, almost army adjacent without being deliberate about it, bought at a department store the morning of a friend's wedding in Savannah, because Marcus had driven 4 hours and left the tie he'd packed on his kitchen counter. He took the elevator up. The lobby of Fulton County Civil Court had the specific institutional neutrality of a building that has processed too many human situations over too many years to have strong feelings about any particular one. Floor wax and recycled air, and the low, organized sound of a place where important things happen with procedural regularity. Marcus crossed the lobby, found room 4B at the end of a corridor. He stopped at the door. He could hear voices inside, more than he expected, more from the density of success sound than the case technically required. He pushed the door open and stopped. The room was full, press in the back row. 3 camera crews and 6 journalists with notebooks already open and the focused, slightly predatory attention of people who have decided in advance that this is going to be a story worth telling. On the left side, members of the Atlanta martial arts community, people Marcus had never met who nonetheless knew exactly who he was. And on the right side, 8 people in jackets with unit patches. Fort Moore, Fort Campbell, Fort Bragg. Men and women ranging from their 30s to their 60s. Sitting straight in the way that people sit when straightness has become habitual rather than performed. Marcus had not called any of them. He did not know how they had found out about the hearing, or who had told them, or how they had coordinated the drive from wherever they each came from. He knew only that they were here. One of them, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and an 82nd Airborne patch on her left shoulder, caught his eye as he walked down the center aisle. She didn't nod, didn't wave. Just held his gaze for a moment with an expression that communicated, without requiring words, exactly what it needed to communicate. "We are here." Marcus walked to the respondent's table. Garrett was already there. 2 binders, a laptop, a legal pad covered in handwriting so small and precise it looked typeset from a distance. He looked like a man who had done this 100 times, which was accurate, and who understood exactly what was at stake in this particular room, which was also accurate. Sonia sat in the second row, phone off, hands folded in her lap. She had submitted every file 3 days ago, every clip and timestamp and the storage room audio indexed and labeled with the methodical thoroughness of someone who had spent 9 years building cases from pieces and understood which pieces mattered and why. There was nothing left for her to do now except sit here and breathe. She was working on the breathing. Across the room, Victor Hargrove in a custom Navy suit. Ryan beside him. No sling today. Hands in his lap. Eyes fixed on a point on the table approximately 18 inches in front of him. Harold Whitfield, their attorney, arranged his papers with the unhurried confidence of a man who had been paid enough to feel unhurried. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Whitfield went first. He built his picture slowly and with care. A trained weapon. A man who had spent 12 years learning to incapacitate human beings with his bare hands and had then concealed that knowledge behind a name tag and a mop in a civilian gym. A man whose apparent harmlessness was itself the danger. The respondent applied a chokehold, Whitfield said, his voice carrying the measured gravity of someone who has learned that pacing matters as much as substance, a technique designed at its core to render a person unconscious. He applied it to my client in front of 40 witnesses in a space where people come to learn and to feel safe. A pause. This was not self-defense. This was a demonstration of exactly how dangerous this man is and exactly how little it takes to make that danger visible. He let it sit. Ryan took the stand. He sat slowly, looked at his hands in his lap. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful, the product of preparation. "I just wanted to run a good class. I invited Marcus up because I thought it would be a positive moment. Like a team thing. I thought he was okay with it." He stopped, swallowed, and then before I understood what was happening, I was on the ground. I tapped because I genuinely thought he was going to kill me. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face coming at me. Whitfield, nothing further. Garrett stood up. He did not rush. He buttoned his jacket, straightened his legal pad, set down his pen because he didn't need it. He walked to the center of the floor with the ease of someone who has won the argument and is now, as a matter of professional courtesy, showing his work. "Mr. Hargrove," he said, stated that Marcus agreed to participate, that he came to the mat voluntarily. Yes, that he gave some form of consent. A nod, a word, a raised hand. Yes. Garrett opened his laptop, turned the screen toward the room. "Your Honor, Exhibit A." He pressed play. The room heard Ryan's voice through the speakers with the clarity of a 4K recording made by someone who knew what she was doing. "Somebody go get the mop." The hallway, 2 students walking out, coming back with Marcus between them. And then Ryan's voice again, arms spread wide, performing for 3 cameras and 14,000 people watching online. "Ladies and gentlemen, Tonight's special guest. Garrett paused the video. The room was very still, Mr. Hargrove. At what point in this footage does Marcus Webb say yes? Ryan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Does he nod, raise his hand, sign a waiver, indicate in any way whatsoever that he is choosing to be there? Silence. I'll answer for the record. Garrett turned to the judge. He doesn't, because he wasn't asked. He was summoned. The way you summon something that doesn't get a vote. 4 seconds of silence. Deliberate. Earned. Then he moved. Exhibits B through F. Each one played in full without commentary, because commentary would have been redundant. The corridor clip. 80,000 views. Even the equipment cleans itself here. The head pat video. 200,000 views. Ryan's hand coming down on Marcus's head twice, with the loose ease of a man patting something that cannot object. When the janitor tries to join the big boys. The kick pad session. 300,000 views. The force of the kick driving Marcus into the wall. Marcus absorbing it in work boots with flat heels. Not going down. Saying nothing. Even the mop can be useful sometimes. The storage room audio. Ryan's voice, close and without do, is in Show Up When I Ask. On camera. Simple. The Instagram story. Black background. White text. Friday Night Live. Giving the mop a lesson he'll never forget. Each clip played in full. The room watched them together. A woman in the press row placed her hand over her mouth during the head pat video and did not remove it for a long time. The woman with the 80-second airbore patch on the right side looked at the floor after the kick pad clip, with the expression of someone who has spent years training people to be precise and controlled, and is watching that training used as raw material for someone else's entertainment. Whitfield did not look at the screen. Garrett closed the laptop. Your Honor, this is not one isolated incident. This is a documented, monetized pattern of harassment spanning 3 weeks. The plaintiff filmed himself humiliating this man. He posted the content for profit. He promoted a live event specifically designed to publicly degrade a man who was an employee on his own family's property. He turned to face Ryan directly. Mr. Hargrove, how much revenue did your account generate in the 90 days before the Friday night event? Whitfield, objection. Relevance. Judge, overruled. Ryan, I don't have the exact figures with me. I do. Garrett produced a document, 2 pages, printed clean. Exhibit G, Creator Fund payment records obtained through subpoena. Your account generated approximately $4,800 in 90 days. 71% of that revenue came directly from content featuring Marcus Webb. He looked at Ryan without particular heat, just precision. You earned $4,800 from this man's humiliation, and when he defended himself on that mat, using 0 strikes, applying controlled pressure, releasing the moment you tapped, your family's response was to sue him. The number stayed in the air, $4,800, from one person's dignity. Finally, Your Honor. Exhibit H. Garrett held up the folder. 4 prior complaints filed with the Georgia Secretary of State's office against Hargrove Combat Academy, all from former students, all alleging coerced participation and physical intimidation by staff, all settled privately with non-disclosure agreements. The settlements are sealed. The complaints are public record, and they are indexed, and they do not disappear because a family with resources preferred they would. Whitfield stood, Your Honor. The relevance of prior settlements to this proceeding is questionable at best. The judge looked at him over her glasses. I'll determine what's relevant in my courtroom, counsel. Sit down. Then the door at the back of the room opened, not loudly. The careful, slightly unsuccessful attempt of someone trying to enter a formal space without disrupting it. The court clerk stepped out and returned and leaned toward the judge and spoke quietly. The judge looked up from the documents she had been reviewing. There is a young man in the corridor who has requested to make a voluntary statement. He is not listed as a witness. He states he has relevant personal testimony and drove here this morning specifically to give it. She looked at both tables. Counsel? Whitfield? Your Honor? Procedurally speaking, an unvetted witness at this stage is highly irregular and the plaintiff objects. The judge, this is a civil hearing. I have discretion. I want to hear what he has to say. She looked toward the back. Send him in. The door opened. Tyler Marsh walked in, 20 years old. Button-down shirt with the slightly unironed quality of someone who had put it on before dawn after an interrupted night's sleep and had driven 3 hours from Savannah because something would not let him stay home. He was not a large person. He had specific quality of someone who had been smaller than he wanted to be for a long time and had recently, in some private way, begun to stop apologizing for it. He walked to the front of the room. He did not look at Ryan. He did not look at Marcus. He looked at the judge. I'm not an attorney, he said. I don't know the right procedure for this. I just need someone to hear something in a room where it's on record. And I figured this was that room. The judge, go ahead. Tyler had been a student at Hargrove Combat Academy for 11 days. He had enrolled 2 years ago. 20 years old. Newly arrived in Atlanta. Looking for discipline and structure and something to organize himself around. $400 a month was more than he could comfortably spend. He paid it anyway because the gym looked serious and he wanted to be serious and he thought being in a serious place would help him become one. Week 2, third session. Ryan stopped the class and pointed at Tyler. Come up, let's see what you've got. Tyler had 3 sessions of training. The person Ryan matched him against had 3 years and 40 pounds. I didn't know enough yet to understand how large the gap was, Tyler said. I just knew I was losing, every exchange, every position. And Ryan was narrating it to the class, making observations, and I could hear people reacting, and I understood I was the entertainment. He stopped. After the session, he posted the clip. The caption said, "First-timers shouldn't skip the tutorial." With a laughing emoji, he paused. I quit the next day. I stopped training completely, for 2 years. He looked at his hands for a moment, then back at the judge. Last Friday night, I saw the video of this man. And I watched it a lot of times, not because of what he did technically, because of how he walked away, like he knew exactly who he was the entire time, even when they were treating him like he was no one. Another pause. I drove here this morning because for the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel like I was wrong for thinking what happened to me wasn't right, and I wanted to say that somewhere it would be written down. He stopped. No one spoke. The veteran with the Fort Moore patch was looking at Tyler now, not at the floor, at Tyler. With the expression of someone who has watched a particular kind of damage be done to a particular kind of person more times than they have ever been able to prevent, and who recognizes it across the specific details the way you recognize a key that fits a lock you have carried for years. Whitfield did not object, perhaps because the legal grounds were genuinely uncertain, perhaps because some things, in some rooms, simply cannot be contested without revealing exactly what you are. The judge asked Tyler 3 clarifying questions. Then she thanked him and he sat in the nearest available seat in the aisle because there were no seats left. She looked at the respondent's table. Mr. Webb. Do you wish to make a statement? Garrett looked at Marcus. Marcus was still for a moment, not deciding. He had known since Tuesday evening what he wanted to say. He had known it the way you know something that has been waiting a very long time for the right room. He stood up, slowly. He did not look at Ryan. Did not look at the cameras in the back, or the journalists with their notebooks, or the 8 people on the right side of the room who had driven from other cities to sit in these chairs. He looked at his hands. One more time. Then he looked at the judge. I want to say something, he said. That has nothing to do with this case. He said the name clearly, Kendrick Farrell, so it would be in the record, so it would be in the room, so it would be somewhere other than inside him, where it had been living for 6 years, taking up space. He told it the same way he had told it to Garrett at his kitchen table. The demo, the distraction, the half-second, the wrong angle, the surgery, the 3 months, the full recovery, the review board that found no fault and closed the file and told him he was free to go. Nobody blamed me formally, Marcus said. Kendrick himself told the board it was an accident. He wasn't wrong. He paused. I submitted my discharge papers 3 weeks later. I told people it was my shoulder. That wasn't the truth. He looked at his hands one final time. I spent 6 years cleaning floors because I didn't trust what these hands could do anymore. Every morning I'd come into a gym full of equipment I knew how to use and a mat I knew how to stand on, and I'd tell myself that staying quiet was the same as making it right. He stopped. It wasn't. It was just staying invisible, and I had already been invisible long enough. He looked up Kendrick Farrell. If you ever hear this, or read it, or if somehow it finds you wherever you are now, I'm sorry. You deserved better from your instructor. You still do. And I should have said that in an actual room out loud a long time before today. He sat down. The room was completely still. Not the silence of shock. Not the silence of people deciding what to think. The silence of a room full of people who have just heard something true said plainly in a place where plain truth is not always what arrives. Sanja had both hands pressed flat on her knees and was looking at the table in front of her with an expression that had nothing to do with the table. The veteran with the Fort Moore patch had her eyes closed, not from distress, from recognition. The judge removed her glasses. She set them on the bench. She looked at both tables. She looked at her notes. Then she asked for the 40-second clip to be played one final time at half speed. The room watched it together, the sidestep. One step, clean, the kick passing wide. The entry, Marcus's level dropping. The takedown, so fast it compressed time even at half speed. The transition. The hold applied at partial pressure, held with steadiness. Released the moment Ryan's hands went flat and tapped. 0 strikes. No expression of anger on Marcus's face at any point in the footage. No words. Just precision. And then the mop. And then the door. The judge put her glasses back on. The court finds no basis for the plaintiff's claims. Video evidence clearly establishes that the respondent was brought onto the mat without consent and under conditions that constitute coercion under Georgia law. The force applied was proportional, controlled, and ceased immediately upon submission. 0 strikes were used at any point in the incident. She looked at the plaintiff's table, steady, unhurried. Furthermore, this court is forwarding all evidence, including the prior complaint filings and the revenue records pertaining to content, featuring the respondent, to the Georgia Secretary of State's office for independent review of Hargrove Combat Academy's operating license. The pattern documented in these exhibits warrants examination beyond the scope of today's proceeding. She picked up the gavel. The case is dismissed. It came down. The veteran with the Fort Moore patch stood first, just her, standing quietly in the right section of the room. Then the person beside her. Then the others, one at a time, until all 8 of them were on their feet. They did not applaud. This was a courtroom, and they understood where they were. They simply stood, which was, in the specific language of that room at that moment, exactly enough. Marcus did not move for a while. Garrett put a hand on his shoulder. It's over. Marcus looked at the table, at his hands, at the folder with the 4 complaints, at the small, procedurally unremarkable room that smelled like floor wax and had just contained something he had not expected to find room for. No, he said quietly. Garrett waited. It's not. He was right. What followed was swift and thorough and had the quality of something long overdue arriving all at once. The Georgia Secretary of State's office opened a formal review of Hargrove Combat Academy within 72 hours of the ruling. The 4 prior complaints were reopened. Within 2 weeks, 11 more former students came forward. Their accounts differed in detail and were identical in shape. Coerced participation, public humiliation during sessions, retaliation in the form of social media posts against anyone who resisted. One woman said Ryan had posted a clip of her failing a technique with the caption, "Some people are born spectators." She had quit the next morning and had not walked into any gym since. The Academy's operating license was suspended pending review. Victor Hargrove issued a statement calling the investigation politically motivated. Ryan would be stepping back from instruction to pursue personal development. Victor said this in front of the Academy's entrance on a Tuesday morning to a camera crew smaller than the one that had covered the Friday night live stream. No questions were taken. By Thursday, 3 sponsors had sent termination notices. Ryan's TikTok account was permanently banned for community guideline violations. His Instagram lost 22,000 followers in 5 days. The energy drink company, the compression wear brand, the supplement company, all gone. Their communications were brief, legal reviewed, and identical in their careful avoidance of creating additional liability. He deleted every video he had ever posted. But the internet does not forget. Mirror accounts had reposted everything. The 40-second clip had been viewed across all platforms, in all its forms, by more than 50 million people. It had been featured in 2 documentary short films about online harassment. It had been cited in academic work about the monetization of human dignity. It had been shown in a media ethics class at a university in Ohio, where the professor asked students to identify the moment the audience became complicit. The students argued about it for the rest of the semester. Hargrove Combat Academy closed its doors 6 weeks after the ruling. The neon sign on the exterior went dark on a Wednesday evening. Victor listed the property through a commercial real estate firm. He did not speak publicly about any of it again. A veterans organization launched a crowdfunding campaign for Marcus. It raised $64,000 in 8 days. Marcus used part of it to pay back rent and clear the remaining debt from the weeks between his termination and the temp job. The rest he set aside with the careful intention of someone who has held very little for a long time and is now trying to be thoughtful about what to do with more. The call came from the 5th Ward Community Center in East Atlanta. An older building in a neighborhood where $400 a month for a gym membership was not a number anyone would say out loud without laughing. True. They had a mat. True. Second-hand equipment. True. A heating system that took 20 minutes to find its temperature in winter. True. And an after-school program that had been looking for something it couldn't quite name yet. They offered Marcus the position of head instructor for a new youth self-defense program. Salary, benefits, health coverage, a mat with his name on it. Marcus said yes before the sentence was finished. He named the program Ground Up. The curriculum was not about fighting. It was about the thing that is harder than fighting, that requires more precision and more patience and more genuine internal strength than any technique Marcus had ever taught in 12 years of instruction. It was about the space between impulse and action, about knowing when the most powerful thing available to you is the choice not to use what you have, about the fact that the only person you can ever fully control is yourself, and that learning to do that is a lifetime's work. First class, 15 students, ages 17 to 23. They came in carrying the specific combination of bravado and uncertainty that belongs to young people who want to be taken seriously and have not yet been shown consistently that they are. Marcus pulled a chair to the center of the room and sat down in front of the first row so he was at eye level with them, not above, even. First lesson, he said. What is the difference between strength and power? Silence. A young man in the second row. 17. Arms crossed. The posture of someone who has decided preemptively that this is probably going to be a disappointment, said, Same thing. No, Marcus said. Power is what you can do. Strength is knowing when not to. He let that sit. I'm going to spend the next few months teaching you the second one. The first one comes with the territory. The young man uncrossed his arms, not all the way, but enough. By the second month, there were 40 students. By the sixth, a waiting list. The wall near the entrance collected notes from parents. Not formal correspondence. Actual handwritten notes on whatever paper was available. A mother from Decatur whose son had come home after 3 sessions and sat at the dinner table and talked, for the first time in 2 years, about something other than his phone. A father from East Point whose daughter had told him she had learned that the hardest thing in any confrontation was choosing to walk away from it, and that she was going to practice that. Tyler Marsh drove up from Savannah every Saturday. He completed the 12-week program first. He was the first person Marcus asked to assist with the beginner sessions, not as an instructor but as someone who had been where the new students were, who could sit beside them in the way that only shared experience makes possible. Tyler said yes without hesitating. Of course he did. Sonia Adler left her paralegal position 4 months after the ruling. She enrolled in law school at the University of Georgia. Her admissions essay did not mention Marcus Webb by name. It was about a Wednesday afternoon in a storage room where her thumb found the record button before her conscious mind finished the sentence explaining why it should, about the difference between witnessing something and doing something about it. About 14 years of being very skilled at the first and uncertain about the second, and about deciding at 32 to find out what the second one felt like. The admissions committee offered her a Socheps. She texted Marcus when she found out. He replied, "Of course." She sent back, "Shut up." He sent back, "Congratulations." She sat in her car in the law school parking lot and laughed out loud for the first time in longer than she could accurately measure. Garrett Wynn joined the advisory board of Ground Up. He brought the case to every veterans' rights conference he attended, which was several per year because the case had become more than itself. It had become a reference point, a before and after. A moment people return to when discussing the specific category of harm that gets overlooked because it is filmed and captioned and monetized, and therefore reclassified in the public mind as content rather than what it actually is. 4 months after the ruling, Georgia introduced new state guidelines requiring formal written consent protocols for all demonstration and sparring activities at licensed martial arts facilities. There was no official name for the regulation. People in the field called it the Webb Standard. Marcus found out from a news article someone sent him. He read it twice. Then he set the phone down and went to teach the Thursday evening session. 3 months after the academy closed, a small newspaper in Macon ran a brief item. A new student had enrolled at a mid-level gym outside the city, white belt, beginner's class. The sign-in sheet listed the name as R. Hargrove. A blurry photograph appeared on social media the following day. The comments were split. Some says it was a calculated move toward rehabilitation. Some said it was the most honest thing he had ever done. Some said nothing because they were still thinking about it and had not finished yet. Marcus was asked about it during a local news segment filmed in the ground-up parking lot on a Thursday afternoon. The reporter showed him the photograph. "If that's Ryan Hargrove, what would you say to him?" Marcus looked at the photograph. He looked at it longer than the question strictly required. "I'd say it takes more courage to start over than it ever took to show off," he said. "And if he's really starting from white belt, then he's learning the first thing I teach in this program, which is respect the mat. Respect the person standing across from you. Everything else comes after that." The reporter paused. "Then, do you have any anger left?" "About what happened?" Marcus considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "I cleaned floors for 3 years in a place that treated me like I wasn't there," he said. "I'm not angry. I'm just glad someone finally looked down and saw who had been standing there the whole time." The camera held on his face. He looked into it without performance. Then he turned and walked back inside. The kids were waiting. Late evening, ground up. The last student had left 40 minutes ago. The building had the particular warmth of a space that children have recently occupied. A residue of energy, the impression of noise that had been here and was not anymore, but had left something behind that was not nothing. Marcus swept the lobby, then he went to the training room. He got the mop from the supply closet. Same mop, different building. The supply closet here smelled like pine instead of industrial cleaner, which was a difference Marcus had noticed his first week and privately appreciated. He mopped in straight lines, left to right to left. The rhythm so ingrained it required no attention, which freed the attention for other things. For the 40 students on the waiting list. For the Thursday session, where the boy who had come in with his arms crossed had finally, for the first time, asked a question that wasn't a challenge. For Deja, who had texted that afternoon to say she had declared her major, and also that she was eating vegetables now, both pieces of information delivered with equal weight. He worked his way across the room. He reached the edge of the central mat. He stopped. He set the mop against the wall. He looked at the mat, blue vinyl, edged in red, the same patient quality of waiting that mats have always had in every room Marcus had ever been in that contained one. He stepped onto it, not because he had to. Not because someone had summoned him or positioned 2 students on either side of him or built a live stream around what happened next. Because the mat was there, and he was here. And for the first time in a very long time, those 2 facts were not in conflict with each other. He stood in the center. He looked around the empty room. The walls were the pale green of a building maintained on a budget and kept with care, which Marcus had come to understand was its own kind of statement. On the north wall, the program name in clean stenciled letters, ground up, and below it 3 words Marcus had chosen himself: strength, control, dignity. On the bulletin board near the door, between the class schedule and a flyer for a neighborhood blood drive, was a piece of white paper, hand-lettered in thick marker by the young man from the first class, the one who had sat with his arms crossed and said strength and power were the same thing, and then quietly, uncrossed his arms when Marcus said they were not. 2 words, the quiet man. Marcus looked at it for a long time, then he bowed, not dramatically, not for any camera. A small, deliberate inclination of the head toward the empty room, the way he had been taught to bow at Fort Moore before he understood what it meant, and the way he had continued to do it across 12 years of understanding that what it meant was this: I respect this space. I respect what can happen here. I respect the version of myself that shows up when I step onto it. He straightened. He stepped off the mat. He picked up the mop. He finished the floor. He turned off the lights. He locked the door. He walked to his car through the quiet Atlanta evening, not hurrying, not looking over his shoulder, not carrying anything that did not belong to him. In the building behind him, in the dark, the hand-lettered sign stayed where it was. The quiet man, which was exactly right, which had always been exactly enough.